Talk 3, the Great Rejuvenation of Chinese Nation and Chinese Modernization.
The report on the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China actually says that we should promote the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation through the Chinese modernization. So what is the relationship between them?
Well, Chinese modernization fundamentally and basically is, as a Chinese dream, is a national dream, is a national modernization. And Chinese nation are in our history and now talking about the great rejuvenation of Chinese nation. I have to point out very proudly, Chinese culture is a very representative culture in the world and has made some unique and a very irreplaceably important contribution for the evolution of human culture. And the Chinese culture is characterized by some very unique interpretations in philosophy and its expression of beauties. And it has a very glorified history with very, very important contributions, not only technologically, but also culturally for the human, for the whole world. And unfortunately, however, in the past century, particularly, let's say, in the early modern period, roughly 19th century, as we have talked about, China was a backward nation in terms of the way to modernization. And the Chinese people, the Chinese government at that time, the late Qing dynasty, the government, they stick to the principle of a closed-minded policy to the world. In this sense, China was cut off from the world. China was marginalized from the way of modernization. And China was, unfortunately, fall into the pool of the Western powers as a colony. So that is a very painful, very a bitter experience and a national memory for the Chinese people.
To achieve this dream of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, all the Chinese people must participate in this movement. And to do that, they also have to retain or sometimes to regain their confidence in traditional Chinese culture, in the Chinese nation. Do you think the confidence in China's history, in China's uniqueness is important?
Oh, absolutely. The confidence, seemingly, it is a kind of subjective emotion. However, I would like to clarify and emphasize national confidence is a manifestation of the national wisdom. If we review the modern period, the modern history of China, you can find that actually, say, in the 19th century, the leading Chinese intellectuals, they've lost their national confidence because of China falling into a backward country in the sense of modernization. So a lot of Chinese books, when they wrote the Chinese books, they made a very, very strong criticism on the Chinese culture. And even some scholars calling for, say, well, we should give up the Chinese tradition and the culture, fully, converted ourselves into the Western style and follow the suit of the Western culture. And even some people argue we should abandon the Chinese language, Chinese characters, because this is kind of the root of the Chinese problems. All these arguments, absolutely, they were the manifestation of the lack of national confidence. And because only by means of independent thinking style, only by sticking to the principle of being independent on your own sources, resources, and your wisdom and your intellectual assets, a nation could find its way to modernization instead of being fully, deceived or fully misled by some, misconceptions or by some intentional or deliberate misleading powers.
resilient nation. It's
Yes.
full of vigor.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the vitality of this nation and the Chinese modernization?
Well, so vitality of the nation is a very elusive term, to be honest, because we can never see it or touch it. But it is obviously ubiquitous. It is everywhere. And vitality of the nation is a very decisive factor for a nation to develop and proceed, even in face of some, adversary situations. It can pick up and restore its confidence and then move on, In this sense, let me quote some ideas from social Darwinism, although I don't think social Darwinism is absolutely right, but it do give us some enlightenments for us to understand. For example, the theory of social Darwinism say, the survival of the fittest and the selection of the best. The reason here is that the Chinese people stick to a kind of philosophy that is, the Book of Change, the Chinese very classical philosophical book, and always interpreted the world as the life is full of changes. Life is full of, a lot of unpredicted factors. However, the only thing for us to survive and thrive is we should adapt ourselves to different conditions and situations. And also, if you transfix yourself upon some very, very certain routine ideas, you have no future. So we have to always keep a very, very alert eye upon the new world, upon the fresh things, and always ready to make some changes in response to the changing conditions. In this sense, I think the Chinese people are the reason China's rejuvenation of the national kind of reality now is because that we are a very adaptable nation.
So the Chinese nation is always open to changes and is willing to adapt itself to the ever-changing external and internal conditions.
Yeah.
Does this mean that the Chinese nation, the Chinese people are always learning, always improving themselves?
Well, in the Chinese philosophy, we always say there's no perfect thing in the world. Well, maybe the real perfect state is there's some imperfection in the perfection.
Very dialectical.
Yes, very, very dialectical. And in this sense, I would like to say the Chinese people are a very much learning nation and always ready to learn, and very hard-working nation, very diligent culture. And the reason is that because we have a very, very deep, inherent fondness, love of our earthly life. As I've pointed out, we attach very much importance to the blood relationship. And we attach very much importance to the daily life. And we think that our profound wisdom draws on the daily life, draws on the everyday life, and down to the earth, and be realistic. Very, very devoted and dedicated to the family member. So we are working not for ourselves. We are working primarily on the first position, not for ourselves, but for our family, but for a group. Because that is how we lay our value.
So the Chinese people are willing to change, to adapt, and they pay more attention to this daily, mundane life, and they care for their family. Does this mean that, or do these elements actually contribute to the realization of the Chinese modernization?
I would like to say yes. Because, if you review the evolution of the Chinese modernization theory, if you review the evolution of Chinese, socialism, the Chinese characteristics, you will find that it's really an evolving concept. It is always in response to different times and different situations.
So given the Chinese people's confidence in their own nation, the Chinese nation, and given the inner vitality of the Chinese nation, it seems that it is very much likely, it is very possible for us to achieve the Chinese modernization, this historical mission, and the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation?
Yes, actually, as I said, Chinese modernization on the first position, on the first place, is a national dream. It's a national modernization. It's a rejuvenation of Chinese national culture and the Chinese nation. And definitely, there is a common goal for the Chinese modernization and for Chinese, rejuvenation of its culture. And I don't think there's a contradiction between each other. And they are very much in full correspondence with each other. While specifically, our Chinese modernization, the goal for that is to build China into a strong, into a modern, into a socialism country. And we are on the way now. And politically, we would establish a very effective and modernized social political system in response to the modernization, the modern culture, modern society. And economically, definitely, economy in the Chinese tradition is always in service for or at the interest of the majority of the people, for all the people. So try to keep and maintain a well-balanced society and try to meet up with the people's needs is the goal of the economy. And ultimately culturally, Chinese modernization culturally means we would establish a Chinese modern culture, 中华民族现代文明. So ultimately speaking, we want to develop China economically, politically, and ultimately speaking, culturally. Because a cultural nation, a culturally prosperous nation, an ethically prosperous nation is the ultimate goal for a nation, for a country.
So what I've learned from your presentation just now is that really there's truly a close relationship, a close link between the modernization as a historical mission for China and the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. I mean, the modernization in China, the Chinese modernization, has again injected vitality and a hope for a brighter future for the rejuvenation, for the Chinese nation to rejuvenate itself.
Yes, definitely. Or it will definitely inject some new power, new energy, new vitality, fresh vitality of the nation into our Chinese future and the prospects. Thank you.